And welcome back. Our second conversation this morning, we're joined by representatives of UNICEF, and we're going to be discussing the juvenile justice and its ambit within the law. In studio this morning with us is the Acting Director of Community Rehabilitation Department, Ganesha Smith. Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
And she's joined by Michelle Segura Magan, the Child Protection Officer with UNICEF. Ladies, good morning.
Good morning.
And thank you for being here.
It sounds like a heavy topic.
It is.
Juvenile justice within the law. Where do we begin from in terms of being able to contextualize this and the work that UNICEF is doing to perhaps promote the awareness of juvenile justice and law?
Right. So maybe we could start by just defining what child justice is. Child justice is, in very simple terms, putting the best interest of the child at the heart of at the beginning, at the middle, and end of any criminal proceeding or judicial proceeding, because children come in contact and in conflict with the law, so they can be victims, witnesses, and they also could commit crimes. So it's just upholding their rights, their best interests, and making sure that it is fair and their rights are upheld.
How does and I think it's almost like a contradiction to think about a child committing crime. Right, or being in a particular state where they have to be witness to a crime because they're so innocent.
Right.
How do you even begin to approach a child that has had to deal with this type of situation? What sort of conversation or mental health practices go into having this type of conversation?
The approach has to be holistically. For one, we're looking at children who, like Michelle said, may have came in conflict with the law or does have a particular case right now, and it's to look at it from a perspective where they may have experienced trauma, their previous exposure, their current environment, and it is to see where they are first. Where exactly is that child psychologically? Where is that child physically? Where is that child emotionally? And then we make a decision in terms of, or at the department, we advocate or make recommendations in the best interest in terms of the direction we would want to support that particular child.
How does UNICEF then work within the laws of Belize? How do you all collaborate with the Belize Police Department or the justice system?
We co-facilitate a Child Justice Steering Committee, which is a multi-agency committee made up of police, the judiciary, human development, police, and we look at interventions from a structural level that need to be made to protect the rights of children, whether they come in contact or in conflict with the law. So it's looking at, do they have psychosocial services? Do they have that mental health support when they come in contact with the judiciary or with the police? Are they supported throughout the judicial process? And then when they come in conflict with the law, are their rights upheld? Because according to the evidence or statistics in Belize, the children that commit offenses are not serious offenses, right? They are what we consider petty offenses, petty crimes, and so many of them are first-time offenders. And that is where we support diversion, the diversion program. And when we define diversion, it is providing alternative measures for children who commit offenses that are not serious, so that it has a few principles that we want to take into account. So non-custodial measures, right? And the reform, the rehabilitative process, because children, they are still learning, they're still developing. I mean, their prefrontal cortex is still, it's still developing, right? Yeah. So they are, we have to take into account their evolving capacities, and that they are able to learn, to turn a leaf easier than adults. Not to say that adults are not able to be reformed or rehabilitated, but it's easier for children, and that is what the evidence is showing. Up to 70% of children who go through a diversion program are not repeat offenders. So the earlier that you implement this preventative measure, the more successful it is. Yeah. That is what the evidence is showing. And it's no different here in Belize.
Yeah. What is of interest to me, and perhaps it has always piqued my curiosity, is the strict confidence and the sensitivity of the matters that deal with children, particularly when they're either victims of something gone wrong, or even when they are perpetrators of something gone wrong. They're dealt with in such a way where their rights have to be upheld at all costs, right? Mm-hmm. And why I say it's of interest to me is because in the media, we have had a learning curve where you can't just put the person's image or information out there the way we would an adult, right? Mm-hmm. Because in our case with adults, once you've done been through the system and you've processed, we could go ahead and publish and say this person committed or is alleged to have committed this particular offense. In the case of a child, that still has to be kept under wraps, right? And oftentimes our public asks us, well, why never publish the person's name? Because, well, then he get charged regardless of whatever the case may be. And it's a matter of us being able to educate them in as much as we were educated to move away from what would have been questionable practices with publishing certain information. Let's get you on that, Ganesha.
A child is a child is a child. And so we respect that from 0 to 18. At the Community Rehabilitation Department, we do just that. We work with juvenile offenders, first-time offenders in rehabilitation. And so this diversion program is one of our important programs under case and court management. It has two pathways. We work with the police as well as the court. And so a child can be diverted at the police, again for the offenses of a petty crime. An assessment is being done with that particular child. That child has to give account of their action and is willing to participate in the intervention program. And that can be done at the police station. A referral can be made, and the department then develops a 4-month plan with that particular child. At the court, it's a decision for the court to make in terms of the offenses and if the case warrants diversion. It is important. These are our future children, and while I know the general public might say, well, they commit a crime, so punish them, it is not to address an issue from a punitive standpoint, but more of a rehabilitative standpoint, to correct the wrong and have them still continue making good decisions or make better decisions. And so it's important to protect their names. It's important to protect their identity. Unfortunately, we have a culture that is very cruel at times. Yes. And so it's hard for a child to bounce back or to develop resiliency when you constantly have the pounding at them for things that they have done. Yeah. And so that's the standpoint we take, more rehabilitative, more strengths-based approach, looking at who that child is, what that child can do. And yes, we acknowledge the weaknesses, but then we start working with them in strengthening that part of it.
I have a question, and kind of came at the heels of what Michelle was talking about earlier. Sometimes these kids are the results of the environments that they're in, but most of the time, right? So with all of the rehabilitation and ensuring that they are okay, they still have to go back to that same environment. So what sort of skill sets are you all assisting them with to ensure that they rise above that environment and they are no longer a statistic?
In terms of looking at the approach, we don't only work with the particular child, because going back to the environment is not one of the best if it is that you haven't worked with the family. So we do work with families. We do offer counseling. We do offer job readiness programs. And life skills development, we prepare them for that. Again, like I said, in terms of making better decisions. And we do offer some of these services to parents from a different end, or Ministry of Human Development has 3 departments. And so we work with families from different ends. You have the child protection, who works with the victims. We work with the juveniles and offenders. And then we have the family support department who looks at the family as a whole. So we do make internal referrals to meet families where they are.
And that is one of the benefits of diversion, and in that it treats the structural drivers and the root causes,
Right.
Because it is a symptom, right? So a child will not steal or sell weed or drugs because everything is, okay at home. They have food at home, protection at home. And so diversion really looks at these structural drivers like poverty, access to education, violence.
Social support.
And then, social support. And they make an assessment based on all these factors and implement interventions, like Ganesha said, at the community level, the home. And it's a prevention measure, but it's also very practical because we have an overburdened justice system.
Indeed.
And so if a child commits a minor offense and could be reformed and rehabilitated, why should we put them through criminal justice proceedings, right?
Very true.
So it saves us time, it saves us money, and it looks at reforming, a child.
But there's
Is there any metric or measure to gauge the success of putting kids through the diversion program as opposed to putting them through the legal system per se, or the criminal justice system?
There is. We do have check-ins, like 4-month check-ins, to make sure that a person has passed through the diversion intervention program, that what their success stories are, and then we would compare it to a case maybe that have filed and not that was not diverted. Based on our follow-ups or check-ins with the court, we would also go back and advocate, because some of these children are placed in a detention home where the department still have access. So we still have access to persons from the Wagner's facility or the New Beginning that comes under the community rehabilitation department, and that does not take away from us working and developing a plan for them. So we would compare what is working, what's not working, and try to bridge that gap in terms of meeting their needs. A specific matrix, I think it's still a work in progress in terms of identifying what that looks like, but it's we're working on that.
Yeah, but regionally and globally, the evidence shows that the earlier you intervene, the higher the success rates are. And we do have a number of success cases at CRD, and some who have even participated in the apprenticeship program, where the department has had partnerships with the private sector, which have been extremely successful, where these young persons turn their lives around, they learn a skill or get educated, and then they find work, employment, and they keep the employment and lead successful lives. And what we are partnering with the department to do is to recognize these young persons and their accomplishments.
I would imagine it's a difficult task with limited resources, both human and financial, to cover most of these different incidents, not only in the urban settings but also in the rural communities as well. How are you all able to keep the course?
There's a lot of commitment from the community at large. There's a lot of support coming from the community. Once people recognize the work of the department, most persons would assist. We have had persons coming in asking to be volunteers for our summer programs, wanting to support, or businesses wanting to donate. And so that is what keeps us going. Just to go back in terms of the apprenticeship program that Michelle spoke about, last year we saw an 85% of persons who completed the program, and employers kept them on. So they're still employed. We have just recently did a check-in, and about 80% of them are still working. We do have that apprenticeship program coming up again in August of this year, and we do have applications where persons can get at the department. It closes on July 30th and it rolls out on the 18th of August. And so it's open again for persons to participate, youth at risk to participate, and we provide them with the services they need.
All right. Do you all have any final words as we wrap up our conversation this morning?
I think for UNICEF, it is extremely important to have these partnerships, not only with government, but with also private sector, NGOs, CSOs, because it's not an issue that will be resolved overnight,
Right.
and it's not an issue that is only a UNICEF issue or a human development or social issue. We all have a role to play, and I think that is our call to action.
Well, ladies, thank you so much for joining us this morning. And we are going to be switching gears into some eco-tourism. We have our friends here from the Ministry of Tourism to talk about funding sustainable eco-tourism with grant support. You don't want to miss that conversation. We'll be right back.